All right, I think we're running now. Good evening,
Awesome.
everybody, or good morning, or good day, whatever.
Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Tonight we're joined by our friend Eli, and we have a bunch of fun things to talk about, particularly a pen and paper RPG called MÖRK BORG.
yay, pen and paper RPGs. Hey, Fox and Dave are all here. Hi,
Yeah, nice to
friends.
see you. And yeah, we don't, as you might imagine, we don't speak Swedish. So we will likely not pronounce things ideally.
Yeah, we won't do a good job of pronouncing, but we'll try. Hi, Wardsylvania.
Yeah, hey, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for having me, as always.
Yeah, nice to have you, Eli. And if people don't know or aren't following Eli, goes by the handle Red Wet Skeleton on Instagram. So people should follow him.
I'm excited to talk to you all about MÖRK BORG.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to kind of hear some of your opinions and such. And we actually got to play a session with you recently, so that was pretty cool.
It was good having you all in my lovely state of Kentucky.
Yeah.
Hey, Captain Timberley. So I guess some background for MÖRK BORG. The game, it's a Swedish pen and paper role-playing game that maybe 2 months ago I saw a copy of it at my one local game shop and thought it looked cool. Now, mind you, it was all shrink wrapped, so I couldn't really look in it, but I thought it looked cool. And I bought a copy of it and sent it to Eli because I knew he actually played pen and paper role-playing games, and I only kind of just have dabbled in it over the years. So I sent it to him, and he thought it was cool, and we eventually thought it confirmed that we figured that it would be cool, or I figured that it would be cool. And
It was love at first sight.
Yeah, in many regards, I think a lot of the visual and like story elements and stuff are very much sort of what I think like Age of Sigmar 28 sort of wants to be. This is as grim and dark and horrible as like a lot of people are wanting to make like Age of Sigmar and stuff. So like I think in many regards, you could use a lot of things, and it could be a pretty good inspiration for any like projects and stuff like that.
well, maybe it's not what Age of Sigmar necessarily wants to be, because I
No.
feel some of it wants to be like more grand and spectacular, but I feel the notion of what AOS 28 was take some of that but put a bleaker spin to it. And I think MÖRK BORG does a good job of representing that, not necessarily some of the aspects of Age of Sigmar in general, which I feel like GW has been trying to make that something that can encompass a lot of people's different preferences for fantasy. So some of it could be darker and more grim, but some also could be more whimsical, like some of the goblin and big ogre things, which are all kind of weird, particularly like the trollish giant things with their awkward proportions. So I think some of that stuff, they were going for a more whimsical fantasy setting, and I think they want Age of Sigmar to be something that can encompass all sorts of different styles.
Yeah, I think that is certainly true. That's certainly true. But I think in general, yeah, as you mentioned, for AOS 28, I think it tends to be on the bleaker side of things.
Yeah.
In this role-playing game, MÖRK BORG, is super grim.
I am curious, Greg. When you found it, did you have anything to go off of other than the cover?
So the owner of this shop, this little gaming shop in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, he's all about RPGs, and he just told me that he thought it looked super grim and cool, and I picked it up, and I think all what I could see was the cover because it was shrink wrapped. So like I didn't really have anything to go on, and maybe I don't think I had heard of it before. So the game had been kickstarted to help fund it, though admittedly I wasn't part of that. I don't know if that funding was to fund the original Swedish version or if the Kickstarter was to fund a translation of it. Does anybody know that?
I believe it was to fund all of it. Like they
Oh,
did
okay.
Swedish as well as English, and I know that it's been translated into French, I believe, but I don't think that that was like during the Kickstarter. I think that was like someone else has done that. But yeah, the copy that you sent me is actually like the limited Kickstarter faux leather brown, like cold pressed holographic, which mine has started to no longer be holographic in spots because I have looked at it to the point that it's rubbed that off, I guess. But the little note that Greg sent was just like, I think that this would be something that you would love, an overtly bleak RPG setting. And it was just, yeah, this is the bleakest thing I've ever owned.
And I feel like if I had been aware of this when the Kickstarter was going, I probably would have backed it because my goodness, do I just throw money at Kickstarters?
I would have backed the hell out of this.
I feel like I've tried more and more not to even look at Kickstarter because I just throw money at stuff and then like the stuff arrives and then I don't even look at it. Like I feel like I've backed a whole bunch of so Meandering Shade. Hi, Meandering Shade. He mentions Zas Urkala, which is another kind of survival horror-ish RPG that's also very bleak. Yeah, so Meandering Shade, I backed that Kickstarter. I have a t-shirt of it upstairs. And I didn't read it. I didn't read any of the book because that's what I do. I back Kickstarters for cool sounding RPGs and then get them. Don't read the books. Don't play the games. That's what I do.
But we actually played this though, so that's something.
Oh, Meandering Shade, good. You actually read the book. That's great. Do you like it? Should I read it?
You should read it. We don't even have to question that. You should read it, Greg.
Yeah. But yeah, I have a t-shirt upstairs.
Is that the one that Johan Eckerkrans did the art for?
No, that's a different RPG that I backed. So, Zos
also
Urkala, that was a few years ago that was out. And recently an RPG finished funding that is kind of based on some of the books that Johan Egerkans or the Convertorium, some of his books. It's an RPG setting based on those. That is something that recently was on Kickstarter. So that's a different thing, Eli. But There are so many pen and paper RPG settings on Kickstarter. And even not on, there's just so many RPG settings, it's outrageous. And so Dave's getting into Symbarium. I don't know what that is, but I bet it's cool. I think I recognize the name. I think maybe that was published by the same company that put out at least the US version of MÖRK BORG, Free League Publishing. I feel like I recognize the name at least, but don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I am not familiar.
Okay, looking on it, it is a Free League Publishing game. So yes, So it's outrageous how many different RPGs you could read about. And I feel like a lot of people that are big into playing these pen and paper RPGs, probably most of them, they have one or two game systems that they play a bunch, and then they probably just compulsively buy lots of new game books and read them, but don't play them, but then probably incorporate ideas that they got from the different game systems and books into their own games. That seems like what they would do.
Yeah.
I am guilty of that. If it's a crime.
That doesn't sound like a crime. Like, how would, or maybe
no, just I guess metaphorically. No. Exalted Funeral is another RPG company that I have become recently acquainted with because of the game Mothership, which is a sci-fi, like OSR style gaming system that has really got a lot going for it as far as what they can condense into something so small. As far as like page content, I think it's only like maybe 50 pages.
Mm-hmm.
But the sheer amount of stuff that they cram in tables is just, it's crazy. That's actually really useful.
Fox says that their favorite is Apocalypse World, and I played a game of Apocalypse World at that same little hobby shop. They thought they wanted to start a campaign with the Apocalypse World rules, and I made a character and played a session, and then the campaign stopped after the said person moved like 2 hours away. But I know of it and played a game where I didn't know the rules at all, but it didn't matter. I feel like that's more so Vox. I would say I haven't done too much pen and paper RPGing either. Like the three of us when we were in high school, the 3rd edition of D&D just came out, and we bought some of those books and kind of read them, but didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have any friends or family members that had already played it or something to help us. So we kind of read the books, and maybe we kind of tried to play a session, but then didn't do anything with it. And then maybe a few years later, right before college, we bought Call of Cthulhu, one of the versions of Call of Cthulhu, and I ran a few maybe 5 or 6 sessions of that, and that's probably the most serious RPG sessioning we did. Though then over the years I've played a little bit more D&D 4th edition and 5th edition, but never any long campaigns, and it never felt like I ever really knew the rules all that well. But that, I don't know how much rules, that matters. Yeah, and I feel like that's something we're going to talk about tonight when we get into the podcast part of this episode and talk more about MÖRK BORG, where I think the role-playing aspect is what matters the most. And the rules, to me, always seemed like a way of resolving conflicts. And whether you knew the exact rules, I don't know matters that much, so long as nobody playing felt like they were being like cheated or something.
Which, I mean, and I think that's kind of where this discussion, I think, is relevant to Inc. 28, Age of Sigmar 28, and all those sorts of things. It's because they're all, if you're actually playing the game, you want it to be sort of a narrative experience that you're not super bogged down on. Did I make that army list right? Like, what does Kill Team say about falling off the edge of that? Or, those things like are just so secondary to creating an atmosphere, telling a story, creating characters that you're yourself interested in, rather than like, oh, what's the optimal Space Marine build and all that stuff. Because even when Games Workshop talks about narrative gaming and stuff, they're still always really tethered to the rules that they write. and I think we're not wildly interested in that, and I don't think Inc. 28 and those sorts of things in general are either. And so the idea of like looking to different pen and paper RPGs and stuff to kind of get inspiration and setting ideas or narrative things, I think is valuable. And ultimately as well, Inquisitor, the 54 millimeter game that kind of spawned all of this, was the most RPG game Games Workshop had released in a long time, other than maybe Rogue Trader itself. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Lifeboat has some sage advice saying the trick I have to tabletop games is not playing them.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, yeah, I hear you there. I play board games on occasion.
Yeah, on occasion. But so kind of with that in mind, and those sorts of connections and how it seems this MÖRK Borg, I can't
MÖRK
say it
Borg.
right. And it's sort of interesting, grim, and bleak, depressing setting. Just reminds me of what I would like Age of Sigmar 28 to be.
I just cannot. I really, really, really want to be able to enjoy anything remotely related to Age of Sigmar, but I can't. There is just, it's just, Games Workshop is really just trying to cram hope down your throat and in your eye holes and in your nose holes and your ear holes. And I don't understand that concept for a world that literally was killed by chaos. That seems to make no sense to me. So I like to just, I like to think of, if I'm going to make anything fantasy-wise and it's Warhammer related, it's just going to be Mordheim.
Yeah.
Which Mordheim is the first thing that whenever I started flipping through MÖRK BORG, that I was just like, oh, fuck, yeah, this is like Mordheim, but turned up a notch. Because Mordheim already, they're just like, yep, it's the end of days, and there's no hope, and we are damned.
Mm-hmm.
And MÖRK BORG is just like a step further. We know factually that the world is going to end.
So I don't know. You want to just start on the podcast proper and then talk more specifically about this game, because people probably want to hear about that rather than us just talking around how like, oh, this is cool, it's bleak, yeah, it's cool. Like let's just get into this.
Let's look at that D8 flail a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds good. Is everyone ready for me to say the intro thing?
Yes.
I am ready.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a Between the Bolter and Me podcast. This is episode 69. I'm your host, Eric Wire, and I'm here tonight with my two brothers, Adam Wire.
Hey, everybody.
Greg Wire.
Hey, everyone.
And I'm excited to say our friend Eli is back on the podcast again, who people may know better as Red Wet Skeleton on Instagram. Hey, Eli, nice to have you here.
Hey, Eric, Adam, and Greg. How are you all?
Superb.
Yeah, pretty good.
Good. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, no, always a pleasure. And for this episode, we wanted to do something a little bit different than maybe some of our other episodes, but actually talk about a pen and paper RPG that we think has like a really cool setting and aesthetic that fits really nicely with some of the, like, particularly Age of Sigmar 28 and some of those sorts of things. And the game itself is called MÖRK Borg.
MÖRK Borg.
Yeah, so it's a Swedish game. So I will be upfront that we may or may not pronounce things quite right, but we'll do our best.
I think it's key to try and say it with your best Johan Egerkrans like impression. Like his voice, I've listened to him like do an interview once, and his voice, I'm like, I wish I could even begin to hit the depth of the low end of that frequency.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
He just has the deepest Swedish voice, and I assume that is how it's said, just MÖRK BORG.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
But anyway, so this game, it's a pen and paper RPG. So along the lines of something like Dungeons and Dragons was maybe not the first pen and paper RPG, but one of the ones that really rose to prominence and kind of showed a lot of the gaming world what a pen and paper RPG is. Though I don't think it was quite as popular in like Europe as it was in the United States, Dungeons and Dragons anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, MÖRK BORG is like D&D in that, yeah, it's a pen and paper RPG where you don't necessarily have a game board, and the people playing it, they create characters, and then there's a dungeon master or a game master that they kind of set out the story, describe the setting, and then allow the players to decide what their characters want to do, and then the game master describes the situation, and then they maybe control any monsters that the players might have to face, and you roll dice to resolve conflicts and whatnot. And this particular game is fairly rules light in that it doesn't have a ton of rules, and most of what the actual rulebook focuses on is aesthetics and story and imagery to kind of really get you into the world of MÖRK BORG, and the rules kind of take a back seat.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. And admittedly, and kind of also why we're talking about this on the podcast as a whole, is because I think Inc. 28, Age of Sigmar 28, and a lot of these sort of narrative, skirmish-based things that we're so interested in ultimately take a lot of elements from kind of pen and paper RPGs, in that they are often kind of rules light themselves, or aren't super concerned with this tight adherence to any particular rule set, and it's more about creating an atmosphere or just crafting a narrative throughout the games themselves. And how you quite get to there doesn't necessarily matter as much as sort of the process itself. And we were pretty impressed by the game itself and its atmosphere and such, and thought it would be fun to talk about it.
Eli, why don't you describe the setting of this game?
MÖRK BORG is a absolute bleak and hopeless land where pretty much it's not only it's like really shitty, but it's just like factually the world is going to end. The main deity are two basilisks, which are two-headed. And there is he and there is she. And for the longest time, she was pretty much the one of her two heads spoke a bunch of prophecies before one of her offspring, which is the only one that has survived being thrown off of these giant crags, which is referred to as he. The head that speaks the truth is known as Verhu. But essentially this book is based around the concept of a guy crawling through these shitty tombs and stumbling upon Verhu in the year 565. And he set down the creature's whispered prophecies. These lost texts came to be known as the Nameless Scriptures. 300 years later, while working on a new cathedral, the pretty much religion came stumbling upon this tomb with all these scriptures, and were very shocked to see that everything that Verhu said would come true has in fact come true. So now it is just a moment of waiting to see when the next of his pretty much, predictions will come true, leading up until the end of the world. And that is the overarching tone of the whole game, is that the end times are really fucking close. And that there's pretty much either A, you can try to appease Verhu and maybe try to, make him predict the world won't end. You could do the typical adventurer thing and just become like a bunch of treasure-seeking murder hobos. Or, yeah, that's really about it. Either A, try to save the world, B, try to kill the world faster, or just don't give a shit because nothing matters, which is pretty much the overall tone of the book.
Yes, so the setting's super bleak, and the art style that the game employs fits very much with the imagery of black metal and doom metal albums and whatnot. So they kind of co-opt all that evil, if you will, imagery from a lot of heavy metal bands and use that here. Though, interestingly, I feel like a lot of games that might try to use that imagery maybe just kind of co-opt the imagery, and the people who wrote the game don't necessarily always like that music. But this particular game, one of the very first things that it does is it mentions some of the music that helped inspire and help make this game. And boy, are they some pretty cool bands. Like, the three of us are all into really depressing and bleak sounding doomy sludge metal bands. And the list of bands here are great. Like Ash Borer, Bell Witch, Bong Ripper, Conan, Dragon,
Earth.
Earth, Dragged into Sunlight, which is the band that we fashioned our podcast name off of. I Hate God, Electric Wizard, Primitive Man, Sleep, Sun, The Body, Thou. Like, I just couldn't. Oh, Weed Eater, of course. I love Weed Eater. Like, I just read all the list of those bands. Like, wow, I love all these bands. So this is a game that, while it uses imagery that's often associated with that type of music, I feel that it wasn't just taking that necessarily because it looked cool. That was the stuff that actually inspired the game. And then the layout of the book also was made to look like the old fanzines that people used to make, and people still do make now, but they're becoming less of a thing with the internet. But the metal and punk fanzines that people used to make and distribute at shows and whatnot, the layout of the book is very much like that. And the fonts change all over the place, making it look like, they pasted in cutout words from different sources onto the page to spell the things, like spell everything they wanted to say. And
It's like a ransom letter.
Yeah, and I guess kind of speaking to the point of all the different music that inspired them, on the website they actually have a Spotify playlist, link to a Spotify playlist with a lot of music and songs from a bunch of those different bands to try to sort of get you in the mood for the whole thing as well.
One thing in that note, one of the bands that they have listed there is Knoll, and I don't know if you guys have listened to them, but I have become a very big fan of Knoll. They not only do they have a playlist that they like, that one of the guys like put on there to be like, hey, this is some of the shit that we were listening to get us pumped for this. They actually, and God, I wish that I had known about this when it was a Kickstarter, or I would definitely have one. They had the band Knoll make an album called MÖRK BORG, and it It is literally like that's what we were like listening to when we first started to play. It's just like really dark. Really, the correct term is dungeon synth. If no one is familiar with that like genre, but I have become a very big fan of dungeon synth.
Dungeon synth is synth based, like electronic kind of ambient music that I feel like one of the original people who started it was from some black metal band, and then he went and just did his weird fantasy ambient stuff, and then that kind of evolved into a genre that lots of people are still doing stuff today. Let me go to Wikipedia to figure out who it was. Mortis, I think.
Yeah, Meandering Shade just listed it here too.
Yeah, and I feel he was in a black metal band that I don't remember the name of, or maybe I'm making that up. I don't remember.
One of the dungeon synth bands that I've been listening to a lot is called Cobalt, which that's like they all have such good names. So it's just like this guy gets it. I just want to pick up a mace and I want to go brain some fucking kobolds in a dungeon. It's just like, yeah.
And kind of speaking to the idea of sort of like a fanzine or whatnot and all the different fonts and stuff, like it's like just visually stunning, the book as a whole, that it's sort of like a riot of different colors, different fonts, different page layouts, like every single like page or two-page spread like inverts or changes what all the layouts look like. So it's like just constantly kind of a surprise and a delight to look through it with all sorts of bleak and disturbing imagery.
Just fluctuating different types of even pages. Like it's just crazy.
So like even I feel it's something that like even if you weren't like wildly interested in playing the game, just to have it for this cool imagery and kind of ideas, short pieces of like flavor text and whatnot, I think it's like would be great just in that manner. But
like maybe it's like the inside cover, they have a bunch of tables that you can roll on, like to find occult treasures, for example, if you need to make up some occult treasure. And one of the options is an ash gray ring of finger width wide, where all objects that pass through it are obliterated. So it's just a little gray ring that if you put your finger in it, your finger gets obliterated. Like, if that's not like the most metal thing I've ever heard. Like,
I think I have something more metal, Greg.
Yeah.
It's the thing beneath it. This keening music of this small vial flute animates a fetus-sized meat golem in a nearby corpse.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's pretty metal.
Yeah, but
I like that ring the best though. Like, it's a little ring. Like if you found it, like surely you try to put it on and then your finger just gets obliterated. Like, whoa.
Yeah. On the other page, like they have the corpse plundering, which is, I mean, shit. There's so many different things in this book that I would have bought this book alone if they told me like, oh yeah, we've got this table in it. It's just like, that's excellent.
Yeah. So if the corpse plundering table, so if you need to figure out something that you find in a corpse, they have you roll a D66.
So 2 6-sided dice.
Yeah. And like, let's just randomly choose an example. 41, map to a place that cannot possibly exist.
One of my characters found that, and I have like already been trying to figure out how the fuck to include that, but like it's going to become part of something.
Oh, and 35, note with player characters' names, one is crossed out.
So good.
Like, that's great. That's so great.
I'm trying to find. There's one. The old man that you guys
a bag
encountered.
of angry venomous moths.
Yes. Shit, where is it? There is like a brown liquid. Oh, number 46. There was something very wrong with this one. Hands covered with something lukewarm, brown and acidic. Take D2 plus 1 damage and smell terrible for D4 days. In the playthrough we did with our group, someone reached into his pockets and was just like, "Ah, shit!" And like they burnt their hands on this acid, and then they go to his other pocket, and it was, I want to say it was a pocket, pocket full of broken glass. PC takes D2 damage, so it's just this guy's just sitting at a table with a pocket of broken glass and like acid.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
Yeah, but I think just, like there are all these different tables that you wouldn't even necessarily need to use, but just kind of reading through them is sort of a delight, and it kind of gives you a sense of the type of setting that they're trying to create, and I think that in itself is interesting. And another thing that is also pretty cool with how they display the rules, which again, it's pretty rules light, but with each like page or set of pages, they vary dramatically how much information is put within a page or two. There's like, I think you roll a d10 for like character creation to sort of determine what sort of weapons you might have, and that the very first roll, if you roll a 1, the weapon you have is a femur. Like you just use like a femur bone as a club, and there's an entire page is just a picture of a femur that says
and then
1 femur and that it does D4 damage.
And then the next page has 2 through 7 crammed into this man's body.
Like just sort of a pencil drawing of a semi-mutilated body with like a knife stuck in him or like a warhammer stuck in him that is displaying it. It's displaying that these are the different things you could get, but the previous page was only 1 item. This page is a whole bunch, and then the next is a 2-page spread showing like what you get with an 8, a 9, or a 10, which ends up being a flail, a crossbow, or like a 2-handed sword. All of these are different colors and different fonts, and like it's just really stunning looking.
I really like how Zweihander is written as if it's being screamed. It just takes up the end.
And what's funny about it, none of those weapons, they don't have special rules. Like the femur, the staff, the short sword, the knife, they all are identical rule-wise in that if you do damage with them, they do a D4 damage. I feel like if you just took the rules of this book, I don't know, it would fit on maybe 12, 10, 20 pages or something, maybe less than that.
Probably less than that.
Yeah, but it is just like such a like greater sum than its parts. Like that is what is. It is so good.
Like for the beginning portion of the book is a bunch of sort of background sort of text about different places in the world, and all of it's kind of vague and weird, like some of GW's better older fiction that kind of hinted at things but didn't really describe them. And then like the first real set of rules in the game is actually a calendar, or almost like a world end clock. So like the first thing they want to tell you in the rules is that when you're playing this game, you're kind of on a countdown, like a campaign clock, to tell you that after so many things happen, like the world ends. So after 7 miseries occur, like the 7th misery, the world ends. So like literally the first set of rules is telling you when the world is going to end, and depending on how quickly you want, how long you want the campaign to be, they kind of vary how quickly these different miseries happen, which is like just is pretty hilarious. And they have a D66 sort of table that was made to look kind of like a page of a Bible with the different Psalms, but they look like a page of the Bible, but each is like, oh, if you roll like a 5 and a 1, this particular misery befalls the world. And this particular one is, the lake and brook shall blacken and the water become tar. And there are all these like different kind of vague, interesting, bad things that can befall the world.
And after 6 happened, the 7th is always the same, and it's the world ends.
The 7th seal is broken for the 7th and final time. The game and your lives end here. Burn the book.
Yeah, so one of the first rules is that once your campaign ends, they instruct that you should burn the book that you're holding, which that in itself is kind of hilarious.
There's another page in which you can either like a clown, you could roll a d20, or you could man up and throw a fucking knife at this book.
Yeah, so it's just like so many interesting ideas and kind of little narrative snippets that just, I think, end up just being very imaginative and like kind of give you things to think about, or things that you could incorporate either into a session of this, or even just Age of Sigmar or whatever. And like the website itself even mentions that like the game is for like playing within its setting, or just like taking elements of it for your own like homebrew thing. So I think they're very aware that, and they would even like it if you kind of use some of this stuff and do different things with it and just kind of enjoy it as a whole.
And as a player creating your character, me dabbling a little bit with Dungeons and Dragons, you can spend so much time creating a character. Like I went to a bunch of like one-off RPG sessions to play in, where I'd make a D&D character for 5th edition and play a setting, and you'd spend like an hour making this character and deciding all of your feats and your skills and all that shit, and then you'd plan this evening-long event and basically use none of that shit, and every once in a while you had to roll a d20 to see if you hit somebody, and none of it mattered, and none of it was particularly thematic. Whereas this, to create a character, you roll on a few tables to randomize what character class you play as, and there are some tables that can figure out a backstory for you, and you can have an interesting character very quickly.
Yeah, when we made like characters with your all's group, like everybody was playing a different class, and that definitely, it seemed, I don't know if for you all, it seemed like for me, I was like, shit, they're gonna lose interest because this is taking too long. And even then it took maybe like 30-40 minutes
to make like 7 characters.
Yeah, to make 6 people characters simultaneously. Oh, yeah. But that's simply because the other group that I ran through the scenario with, we rolled up 3 characters simultaneously in less than 15 minutes, and we were already playing this game. Like, that's how quick you can make a character. Like, I've made, and that's if you roll it. I mean, they have a character generator that
on
can
their
do it
website,
for you in seconds.
They have a character generator that's pretty great. Scumbirther, it's called. Okay, so we just created a character. You are Fort. You're an esoteric hermit. What is he? He has. You were a single child survivor of an incident in the Valley of the Unfortunate Undead, prone to substance abuse and wasteful, hauntingly beautiful, unnervingly clean, insecure shit stirrer. We'll talk about whatever just left the room.
So good. Man, no.
And
God,
interestingly, and this kind of fits with the just visual style of the game itself, even this like randomized character generation, every time you click to generate a new one, the color profile and stuff changes to
Also,
different.
to make a new one, it's just like kill this one. You click kill this one, and it makes a new one.
So yeah, so I guess that could say while the setting is bleak, it's pretty easy for your characters to die. Like when we played this session with when Eli ran a session for us over the weekend, almost all of our characters just had 1 HP, like 1 hit point.
yeah,
So
glass bones, paper skin.
it would be outrageously easy to die.
Yeah, as far as the world building, like there is some of the best like world building crammed into just like metaphorical, just like 3-sentence little segments in here. I don't know if you guys actually like read through like all the places that were in here, but there are some that are just like they get me more pumped than like pages upon pages upon pages of lore that I've read from Games Workshop.
Yeah.
And that's not like a stab at Games Workshop because I absolutely love their stuff. And I mean, God, I have shelves upon shelves of like every RPG they've ever made. But like the Valley of the Unfortunate Undead, like there is like 3 sentences that when I read those, I was like, holy fuck, I'm going to run this game. Like I'm going to play this game because that is so good. Which, if you don't mind, I'd like to read that to you because it's probably the coolest thing in the whole, in my opinion, the whole damn book.
Yeah.
Read it, man.
But yeah, so the Valley of the Unfortunate Undead. Those without hope travel here seeking an end to pain, a golden afterlife beyond this dark and ruined world. They gather in suicide cults, and the valley's few twisted trees begin to droop strange fruit from hempen rope. Others plumb the crypt seeking Verhu, believing they can persuade him of other fates. Some simply and stupidly leave gifts and sacrifices to a power they cannot comprehend. Gloom grows, obscuring the world like an oil-stained image. Like that is so much world building in like 4 sentences. The gathering in suicide cults and the valley's few twisted trees begin to droop strange fruit from hempen rope. That is the most metal thing that I have read in so long. It's just like, holy shit, there's so many dead bodies from them hanging themselves. The trees are bending. Like, oh God.
Well,
it gets me too pumped.
And one of the things that the lore presents itself like it is looked down upon to kill yourself in this world, in that you're supposed to face the obliteration
with open eyes.
Yes. So there's like an inquisition going around, like basically punishing anyone who wants to try to commit suicide.
In public and for a very lengthy time.
Well, so I think one of the most metal things that I saw in this book is there's a section that describes some creatures, and the first one is the goblin. And
the humble goblin.
And well, the imagery of the goblin, the head of the goblin looks identical to a goblin shark, if you've seen goblin sharks before. But anyway, so in MÖRK BORG, goblins, they all carry a curse, and those that have this curse, they transform into a goblin, and they're powerless to do anything, and they watch themselves turn into this goblin that then goes around and murders people, and they can't do anything to stop it. They're just trapped in that body going around and murdering people. And in order to get this goblin curse, you just need to be in the presence of a goblin. It's not the goblin has to wound you or anything. If you're just in their presence, you become cursed with that. And unless you kill that goblin within a few days, you turn into a goblin yourself.
Within D6 days, if that curse-carrying creature still lives, you will warp irrevocably into one yourself. Then only the dark of Sarkash will hide you.
Yeah. So,
So
all
good.
goblins carry a curse. Once like you, they are now trapped in the prison of their crazed goblin flesh. Only their eyes reveal the truth. A ruined mind watching its body prison perform terrible deeds. Yeah,
You know what
and
my
then
favorite monster is?
what's your favorite
This-
monster, Eli?
Probably this red wet skeleton.
The blood-drenched skeleton that it can mimic the voices of its victims, but it can only repeat the words that it has heard.
It's so good. Even if it wasn't a red wet skeleton, I would still love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there are like, I don't know, maybe like 15 different creatures in it, but they're all a bunch of them are sort of standard creatures in other settings, but just the descriptions and things that they add from it add a lot and make it feel kind of unique for the setting as a whole.
Yeah, like a great
Yeah.
example, the zombie, like zombies aren't particularly interesting anymore, but what they have written about it, the only cure or vaccine is said to be found at the peak of a pale mountain within an infinitely miserable forest of dark leaves. King Fathma the Ninth of Wasteland in particular seeks this cure and knows the name and location of the forest which the mountain overlooks. So, like, I feel like just those few sentences, like, take a zombie, which isn't particularly interesting, and put a little bit of flavor into the notion, like, oh, there's maybe a cure. And it's at this miserable forest that nobody really knows where it is. Like, that in itself, I feel like could be the spawn of a great campaign.
There's this other thing like an undead doll, Lady Porcelain, uh, like relic thieves, different and corrupt. Yeah, and corrupt clerks suffer a punishment of exquisite and deeply impractical cruelty. Their children or grandchildren are enclosed in porcelain dolls, then placed in cathedral windows to die slowly of starvation and heat. Despite warding rituals, many return as vengeful undead, often gathering in large throngs to hunt their tormentors.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
just
so
the-
relic thieves, their punishment is that their children get enclosed in dolls and then suffocate or starve to death.
Oh shit, the wyvern looks awesome.
Oh, the wyvern looks so good.
Kind of like a creepy moray eel or something.
Yeah.
Where the wyvern fly, crops die. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Did you all look much into the arcane catastrophes?
Oh, some of those are. So if you're casting like a spell and you get a critical failure by rolling a 1, they have a whole list of catastrophes, and I only read some of them.
Number 1 is probably still my favorite. One by one, your teeth fall out. Long, brittle fingernails replace them in your gums.
Oh my god.
That one's really good, and I also really like your skin tatters like paper, your flesh melts like wax, and your intestines bloat like balloons, bursting and falling out until all that is left is a walking, talking skeleton.
Wow.
Fun things.
Yeah.
We end 20. Perhaps it's for the best. He emerges from the shadows. At least your suffering is short, almost instantaneous, as the two-headed basilisk devours you. And yeah, and it's interesting because they have different, like in the game, it seems there really isn't magic, or the magic in it is through scrolls, and they have like unclean scrolls and sacred scrolls, which essentially just end up being like kind of magic powers and holy powers, and a lot of them are kind of the standard fare magic missile and like healing or whatnot, but all of them have like interesting names and such that fit with the setting and make it a lot more interesting than just fireball or magic missile and that sort of thing. So, and I think the game in general has a lot of things like that, that the rule system is simple and has elements from other kind of role-playing games and systems, but because of how it's presented and clever naming and things like this, it helps tremendously to create a setting and atmosphere that is just great.
I guess it could be said, if you've never played a pen and paper RPG before and got this, I don't know how
You
good
are
of a
lost.
job. It doesn't do a very good job of telling you how to play such a game. And admittedly, I haven't played too many role-playing games or very long sessions, but I've played enough of them to have a pretty good sense of how they work, and they all basically work similar. And if you've played one or two before, reading this, it isn't hard to understand how it works. But if this was your first pen and paper RPG, you probably wouldn't know what was going on.
You'd probably say something ignorant, like you wanted to burn the book.
Which they'd probably
But-
love.
But I feel
And then they'd
even-
probably love it and use it as their marketing campaign.
Yeah.
yeah. But I guess even to that point, like I think just having it just as sort of inspiration to look at the interesting art and stuff is like more than enough, like warrants the purchase of it.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, just reading it, you'll get tons of cool ideas that you could incorporate in Warhammer Armors, or basically any hobby-related thing you're doing, even if you never played the game.
Yeah, if you buy this book and you make a character that is not interesting and would not fit in with Warhammer, you can mail me your book and I'll eat it. How about that?
Yeah.
And like all there are like, I don't know, maybe 8 or so classes, all of which are interesting.
Yeah, there's
With-
only 6 in this one. The other 2 were already community made, and the book is not even out yet.
Yeah, so like I don't know, there's just all sorts of cool stuff in it that is really worthwhile. And there at the end of it they have like kind of an introductory scenario, which is also cool, and that can kind of maybe give you a sense of how you could use it and run a game. But it's ultimately just kind of like almost like just a sandbox of interesting ideas and allowing you to kind of run with it however you see fit, which again is sort of why I think it fits nicely with our general interest of Age of Sigmar 28 or Inc. 28 sort of games. Because like ultimately Inc. 28 was spawned from Games Workshop Inquisitor game that was much more of a role-playing game than a lot of their other ones, other than maybe like Rogue Trader itself. So I think Inquisitor spawned all of this Inc. 28 and Inquisimunda and all these things, and role-playing was always kind of at the core. Sometimes there would be more role-playing, sometimes there would be less, sometimes more of an emphasis on a game master or not, but there was still always some element there. And I think to me it's more interesting like as more of those elements are kind of included, because it can build a stronger narrative and one that isn't so hinging on these tightly defined rules and army lists and things. So I think it's very worthwhile to look to role-playing games in different settings as a way for inspiration and other ideas and such. Like you don't need to be completely focused on just reading Games Workshop Codex books or like source material like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the amount of like recommendations on like the ammo bunker and other pages from, I think probably the groups that really founded like the Inc. 28 movement. I mean, Mole like pretty much came up with the damn name, but like the amount of like recommendations on, go pick up, the Fantasy Flight book, like Disciples of the Dark Gods. Like it's just a splat book for one of the role playing games for Dark Heresy, and like if you pick that up, yeah, it's just a treasure trove of like ideas for characters for Inc. 28. And I really do think that this book, if it's like really low fantasy that you're looking for, it is just so full of ideas, just completely crammed full.
Yeah, no, like certainly. And I guess with that in mind, I think the release date is maybe
the 25th.
Yeah, of this month. So it isn't necessarily out yet. I mean, perhaps it's in some stores. But
if someone like did the Kickstarter and then is selling a copy.
Yeah, but if not, it should be soon. And I think you can just, their website, you can pre-order a copy, and I think they'll send you like a PDF of the rule book itself as well. But there's also a lot of kind of free PDFs of additional classes that people have made, and some other rules for traveling and short campaigns and a bunch of different stuff, as well as they have
50 new like animals, like or enemies.
And there's like they have a Discord group as well that seems to be quite active, of people kind of talking about it, developing new ideas and things, and you can talk with
the people who made it.
Yeah, like the creators and stuff. Johan Noor, I believe is his name, is one of the people who's largely responsible for the graphic design and most of the illustrations. Like, he's on there. And so I think it's a unique opportunity to be able to work with some of these like really talented people and develop this interesting world, all the while kind of getting ideas and maybe developing some of your own like Age of Sigmar ideas, or creepy cults for Warhammer 40,000, things like that. So
I mean, I feel like all of the characters that we designed in this last session, I'm tempted to want to just make models for them to use in various things, whether it be Age of Sigmar or Mordheim or whatnot, because
every one of them is awesome. Yeah, we did not make a single character with Ural's group or with the previous group that I have played with. Like, there was not a single character that I was like, that would not be worth my time to make that, even if it took a month. Like, I would love to make that character because, holy shit, that's an interesting character. Like, also to like a testament to like how amazing that book is. Literally every single person that I have played with after leaving was just like, yep, well, I went ahead and pre-ordered that.
Yeah, like the three of us played it with Eli this weekend, and like we all went home and all three of us pre-ordered a copy of the book.
Yeah, my friend Sam Cameron and Jeffrey, pretty much they left my house and they were like, oh, hey, here's that link. Pre-ordered. And I pre-ordered one too, because I don't want my like communal copy to be the really cool one that I'm not ever going to be able to get another copy of.
Yeah, no, but so I feel we've been gushing about this for maybe almost an hour now, but yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I could go for days.
Yeah, so perhaps we could conclude the podcast portion of this, and then I mean we can still do more talking, but yeah, so the game's really cool. I mean, we only played one session this weekend, but I can't wait to play more. Like, I ordered a copy of it. I plan to try to go and run some sessions of it at the local hobby store that I've bought the original copy from to send to Eli. Like, I want to run it for some people. Like, it's great.
Yeah, but so yeah, I would encourage people to, go on their website, just look at it, and just see if you're interested in it. But I think, yeah, if you're at all interested in dark and grim fantasy settings and such, I think it'll be up your alley.
And be a constant source of inspiration and ideas to like do all sorts of things.
And if you're really
Not-
into role playing itself, you can even get involved in kind of the creation and such of it as well, which is also cool. So
Yeah, which that's not to derail us like finishing talking, but that was what I wanted to touch on, is that it's amazing that not only is this a really cool like product that you can pick up, but like the fact that the guys who made this are clearly of the same mindset as our whole damn community, that they're just like, hey man, I've made this thing and I would love to have you help me with it. And that they will like, you can send them ideas for stuff, playing in their sandbox, and that they're open to that. Like that is something that is pretty rare for someone who has put all that time and effort into making something to let anyone else come in and just kick sand around. But every exchange that I have had with like the guys who've worked on this book has been excellent. And it's just a really cool community that is very, very much just now getting off of its feet, and I cannot wait to see what else they come up with. That was it.
yeah, no, agreed.
So everybody go out and, if this sounds interesting to you, order a copy of MÖRK BORG, or ask your local hobby shop to try to order a copy for you. And it's supposed to be released early next week. How quickly it will be in shops, I don't know, or how quickly the pre-orders that we did will arrive, who knows. But
they shipped my copy.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, so
excellent.
soon maybe, who knows.
So February 2020.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, thanks everybody for listening to this podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, so the podcast portion's
over.
done.
Well, yeah, so one thing that Eli, you had said about the game was that when you were younger and your mother didn't want you to play Dungeons and Dragons, this is the game that she thought Dungeons and Dragons was.
It really is.
Is a good description. Like everybody's overprotective mother that didn't want you to play D&D because they thought it was satanic or evil or something.
This is legitimately what they were afraid of you finding. Which is, when you were talking about playing D&D, it was just like, man, I have spent just like years of my life like being a GM or like a DM, and it's just like, you would think that I have like played a shit ton of Dungeons and Dragons. I have not. I played Dungeons and Dragons for like, I think maybe 2 sessions with like my friends in high school. And it was fun as shit. And one of my friends dressed up like a dwarf every time. And he would wear a fake beard, and he would drink yoo-hoos and eat ramen in his fake beard. And it was so gross, and I loved it because he was very much like a dwarf. But with that said, our GM did the best that he could, but he did not have the attention span that you need. So I'm pretty pumped to say that like the first like little quote unquote dungeon that I ever like busted out like some graph paper and was like drawing like little rooms with traps was like for MÖRK BORG. So it's just like, oh yeah, I get to be a dungeon master. Because like with 40K, typically like the shit that you're like dealing with, it's just like, yep, it's not a dungeon. It's just like, a hive city. So it's a little different in scale. But 100%, like my mom was not pumped about me playing D&D. She was just like, your friends, one, the devil. The devil's going to get you, boy. The devil's going to get you, boy. And two, your friends are definitely going to stab you. Like that was I think the biggest concern. It was number 2, but she was afraid that my friends would stab me for something related to it, because I think that happened at some point in time to someone who played D&D.
Yeah.
Somewhere, someone got stabbed one time. But like this 100% is the book that my mom was afraid that we were looking at. It's just like, yep, this is just
Yeah.
there's at one point in time there's just a page that's just a gold embossed upside down cross. And it's just like it's pretty fucking metal. Now, with that said, doesn't have anything to do with MÖRK BORG. It's just, once again something that has like bled through from like the black metal influence. But it's pretty badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's as we kind of mentioned, it's cool that they describe it as sort of like a doom metal inspired game, and it's clear that the people who created like really actually know what that means.
Yes.
Like the
They've not just
esoteric
heard of doom metal.
it made me smile to see that the esoteric hermit character class, one of the things you can roll is like a skill or something like he has. One of them was hawk as weapon, which
Yes.
is obvious, like is very clearly, if anyone's a fan of the UK band Conan, one of their songs is called Hawk as Weapon. But you have like an intelligent, crafty hawk that follows you around. But just, I'm sure there are a lot more little subtle references to things as well that are in there. So I think that in itself is fun.
I think my favorite, and it has to be a reference. I refuse to believe it's not. My favorite reference in this entire book is, I think Becca got this one, but it was for the Gutterborn Scum class. You roll like to see like what your quote unquote bad birth was, and one of them is mother hanged from a tree outside of Galgenbeck. You fell from the corpse. And if that is not a reference to Berserk, I don't know what is.
Yeah,
Like-
I can't see that wouldn't be
Yeah,
a reference to Guts.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, it just has to be.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
no.
true.
So many good little details in there.
Yeah. And I guess we didn't mention it on the stream, but honestly, Anna from Gardens of Hecate, she has I think we mentioned it the last week's stream. She has kind of a new light rule set that she wants to use for some of her games, including Sunhold, which this summer. And honestly, that in itself has a lot of, I mean, you can download the rules for free on her website, Gardens of Hecate, but it has lots of RPG elements in it as well, in which like you have a game master to help run it, and there are most of the things you're doing, you're rolling dice to try to beat like a target number to see if it's successful, which is like kind of the classic role playing sort of thing. So like I guess it's not surprising that a lot of these sorts of narrative games and stuff fit really neatly into kind of some of these role playing elements and rules and things like that.
Yeah.
Which I mean, Inquisitor also had a GM featured, and I feel like Necromunda. It pretty much everything that the Games Workshop community page wants us to believe is that you need a GM as well. It'll be more fun if you have a GM.
Yeah.
Get a GM and have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so.
No, which after we played our game, Kelly was commenting that she could not believe that you all did not regularly play role-playing games.
Well, Greg's character was this pale one that had fallen from the stars, and every time he opened his mouth to speak words, wouldn't come
Just
out.
nothing would come out.
Yeah, so the entire session he just like shuffled around, swinging his arms and gesturing,
Oops.
never saying.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, so I did my best to kind of jerk around and emulate what I thought my character was trying to do rather than actually speak any of it. So yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
The character
It's
I
a
was
good time.
playing was like he's like sort of a
Really angry.
a really angry like fighter type character that his face was rotting and
And he had a spookly mask.
and he wore a crumpled up goblin mask to scare children.
Yeah.
And he was illiterate, he couldn't read.
Yeah.
Also could not read.
Hopefully, it would be neat to see if they and I'm sure they will continue to put out like scenarios and kind of missions and stuff. It would be cool if like the creators themselves made like a longer one,
a module or something.
The chances are your characters are just gonna die in the first.
That is true. At the back of the book, there is pretty much a dungeon generator, which I have thoroughly enjoyed using. But there's quite a bit in the book that'll help you pretty much make your own dungeons, make your own scenarios. It wants you to become a GM and get out there and do the good Lord's work.
Yeah.
The world needs more GMs. Go be a GM.
So cool game.
There's a movie about Tom Hanks playing D&D and Satan.
Can't say I knew.
It's his hidden shame.
I don't know why, but when I was reading that, the only thing I could think of was that movie with what is it? Mel Gibson, The Beaver, where he goes crazy and he has a beaver puppet.
I don't know that movie.
Oh shit! Well, you need to watch that.
Okay, Mazes and Monsters, 1982 American made-for-television drama film about a group of college students and their interest in a fictitious role-playing game of the same name. Yeah, wow. Tom Hanks was 26 years old, and it was his first leading role film. Whoa.
Damn. You got too caught up in those mazes and monsters, and you started wanting to stab people. I get it.
Damn.
I love monsters.
This is unrelated,
mazes.
but it seems on Saturday their Games Workshop is revealing some new models for the 2020 Toy Fair in New York City.
What?
They're releasing and showing new shit all the time.
Yep.
That is true.
They did show a picture of kind of a dumb picture of Gazcall Tharaka, like just an illustration that doesn't look that good. Yeah. But they did show a full picture of his little goblin
Makari. Yeah, Makari.
I don't know how good he looks.
He looks okay. Wow, that picture does suck, that artwork. Or, I mean, the artist is obviously talented, but, like, that's not.
I'll say one thing.
Boy.
One thing that doesn't suck is the new community page. It is not
great.
A like Volkswagen Beetle crammed full of shit and set on fire. It's definitely not that.
Not that at all.
Not that at all. And honestly, I'm being generous when I say a Beetle because it's more like a semi-truck size. God, and also the amount of thumbs up on the community page, I would have to think would be depressing enough for them to like take that feature off. Because like the most popular one has 160 thumbs up.
Like, yeah,
That's
that
so good.
That's bananas. Like
that is.
I have like typically more thumbs up like on my shit on Instagram, and I try not to use hashtags, and I'm pretty much a fucking hermit for the most part.
An
Uh,
esoteric hermit.
I am.
That's so
My
great. Yeah.
I pretty much crawled out of my cave to be
Well,
on this
that's because no
podcast.
one even knows those features exist on this. It's just like, do they really need to make their own small social media platform within this
Within their website.
itself, like embedded within it? Like, I think it might even their. I think it even has its own movie video player, such that it's
Mhm.
not going to YouTube. I
I
mean, I'm
do
sure they
also
put
like that
them
you
on
can't
YouTube
give it a thumbs
too.
down though.
But it's just like, do they really need to like reinvent the wheel for all of those things such that they have their own version of it? When like,
Mm,
yeah, it seems weird. I mean, I guess the idea was there that the stuff that's upvoted the most, such that you could find them more easily. And I mean, there's some merit to that, but it's still pretty weird.
on a negative note, do you think it's maybe because they only want thumbs up, so they made it to where you can't give them a thumbs down, and
Yes.
also it's on their website, so like you can't just comment on it and say things that are clearly true?
Yeah, that's true.
I love it. Yeah, well, that's remarkable.
I'm really surprised. Yeah, that's man. That cat's great though. I really like that cat model.
Yeah. The Mind
That-
Stealer.
Yeah, that gets my
Nice.
my model of 2020. We're only 2 months in. Done. Don't need any more. Buy yourself a copy of MÖRK BORG. You get that cat model. If you don't like both of them, send them to me. I'll eat them both.
You don't want to eat that cat model. That'll wreck your
I'll eat-
insides.
Not the way I'll eat it. I'll eat it right. You mark my words.
Yeah.
Eli, what will you do with the model? Eat it.
No.
Shit, I don't know. Honestly, surprisingly,
Keep it in
the
its
first thing-
packaging and put it in the box.
oh, Adam, don't say that.
Mom, you
Uh,
know that's true.
No, I actually, I'm sure someone will beat me to the punch. And anyway, like, here's an idea if no one else has thought about it. Put a human face on that. Take that kitty cat face off. Put a human face on there. Call it
I'm
done.
sure people have thought about it.
It's probably already done.
I mean, this thing already has like a third eye. This right here, you already have a
Mhm.
navigator model done for you. Right there, it's done.
Done.
Your
Isaac,
Chaos
get on it.
Warband, it's done.
Done.
So actually, this reminded me. Sometime last week, I received a package in the mail. It didn't say who it was from, but I believe it was Greg, my brother Greg. I received a box of the new Warlock models.
The good
Yeah,
Greg works in mysterious
that was
ways.
from me. That was from me.
So I now have.
So he sent it with no return address?
Yeah, obviously not. Yeah, he ordered
Okay.
it and had it sent to me. So
That's
I now.
good.
So I now have the Orlok models, and some GW models, I feel when you look at the actual models, they're better than you thought they were. These are not. But the biggest thing that I thought about, and I sort of was questioning, well, I wonder why I never heard this from other people who had models. To me, they look like they're squats. Almost like Games Workshop got rid of squats, and then it took like 20 years or something, or longer than that, and they finally re-released them and called them Warlocks. Because they look like dwarves. They have no abdomen. Their legs are like so bulky, it's like absurd. They really look like a lot of GW dwarf models. They don't have a neck hardly. Like, yeah, like if you wanted to make a squad army, like it's kind of already there for you. I mean, they might be a little big, but I mean, all of Games Workshop models are getting bigger and bigger, so like I don't think it even matters.
Well, so now you have like almost all the Necromunda gangs, like the models, with the exception of maybe the Corpse Grinders.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe did they release another like Enforcer gang with shields or something? Didn't they do that?
I don't know
They
if they were
did.
released or not yet.
I think they were released recently.
Okay. Here's a fun question. Would you rather, Adam,
Mm-hmm.
have to build and paint all of the Orlocks in that box,
Mm-hmm.
or build and paint the new Robute Gildan? Sorry, let me rephrase that. The Triumvirate. So also the super shitty Grey Knight character and what other trash? Cypher.
God.
Yeah, all the trash. That whole box of trash, or this new box of trash.
Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
only 3 models.
I don't know. I think I would paint the Triumvirate or whatever because they're not as shitty looking. I mean, they're shitty looking.
There's only 3 of them too.
There are also 3 of them.
I get it. That's going to be a new segment that I'm going to introduce to your all's cast. I'm just going to get in the chat every week, and I'm going to ask you a really horrible choice question.
Yeah, which would you rather do?
Would you rather?
I think I will. Eventually, I don't know when, but I will try and do something with at least one of the Orlock models, and then I'll probably assemble one of them just as is to use as
Like a comparative, for comparative purposes?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I feel the big thing is, like, I just don't understand why their legs are so bulky. It's just so weird. I don't... we're done. I'm done. I'm not talking about them anymore.
Well, so in that vein, like, I should probably go to bed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's getting pretty late here, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, really, after this, the only thing to discuss would be the new great stuff from Forge World, so...
We can do that in, like, the coming weeks or whatnot.
Spoiler alert.
Yep.
It's all bad.
Yeah.
If you didn't
I
already
mean-
know, yeah.
If you didn't know, with the exception of the things that say Adeptus Titanicus on them, Forge World makes garbage. I will go on the book. With my hand on MÖRK Borg.
There's certainly truth to a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, it has been good. Thank you all for having me, as always.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
no,
was
thanks
fun.
for joining us.
And thanks everyone for being here with us and listening to us talk about something a little different from what we normally talk about. And hopefully, at the very least, gave you some other things to think about, and maybe gave you some
Maybe it made you
ideas.
buy a book.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows? All right, yeah. So thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you again pretty soon. Keep on enjoying the hobby.
Have a good one.
Until next time.
Yep. See you, everybody.
See ya.
Take care.